Thank you, Mr. Müller. Thank you, Mr. Pötsch. I'd like to open it up for Q&A. Please wait for the microphone. First question, Mr. Krog, first row. Krog from Hamburg, Automobilwoche magazine. Mr. Müller, in the United States, there is still a diesel issue, and it seems to be particularly problematic in that particular market. Now, I'm sure you're not going to give us any details about the strategy 2025, but could you give us at least some indication? Can we expect that in the middle of last year, at the latest, you are going to focus on North America, or are you going to focus on other markets, for instance, the Asian markets? Follow-up question to you, Mr. Pötsch. Is the Supervisory Board still trying to find a replacement for Mr. Warland, who did not take up his position as the designated head of the US business? And another question, on one of your slides it said that Oliver Blume is a guest. That's a quote, a guest in the group management board. Could I also be a guest? Of course, I'm just joking here. No, seriously. In den Aufsichtsrat berufen, so wie Herr Müller, als noch Porsche-Chef war, ja Anfang März dieses Jahres auch in den Konzern officially be made a member of the supervisory. Herzlichen Dank, interessante Anregungen. Well, interesting questions here. Mr. Müller. Well, we're not going. You're talking about Mr. Blume, not Mr. Pötsch. I think you mixed that up, that last part of your question. But anyway, I understand your point.
Ist so. Das war ja lustig.
There was a comment off mic. I'd like to come back to the first part of your question. You mentioned the Americas region and the focus we're going to place on the American market. Now, Volkswagen is a global company. And I think you mentioned certain deficits when it comes to opening up certain markets. Well, we do have those deficits, and you mentioned two of them. I could also mention AGGC. We're not particularly successful there. So over the next few weeks and months, we're going to take an in-depth look at all those markets. We're going to ask which brands should be successful on what markets. And of course, Volkswagen plays, or for us, America plays an important role. North America, South America, and all those regions which are currently in political difficulties. I mentioned South America. This is also true for Russia, and this is also true for other regions such as Iran. And you also mentioned a personnel question, and also in connection with the United States. And I can say simply, yes. Of course, we were not happy that Mr. Warland did not take up his job, and of course, we are trying to find somebody else to fill that position as quickly as possible.
Dann mache ich mit der Frage zu Herrn Blume weiter.
Question regarding Mr. Blume.
Ist es ein geeigneter Anlass, zu sagen, dass wir uns alle sehr freuen?
I'd like to take this opportunity to say that we are all very pleased that Mr. Blume was able to continue his career by acquiring the chairmanship at Porsche. Mr. Krug, you know that. Some things are standard procedure, and some people attend meetings as guests initially, and when it turns out that they are mature enough, you take the next step. But there is really no reason to think about this at this point in time. Mr. Blume is looking back on a great career, and he's got a great career ahead. But I'm afraid journalists cannot take part in the group board meetings, I'm afraid.
absolut richtig. So, wir machen hier vorne gerade
Okay, next question.
Wir gehen der Reihe nach durch. Ja.
Steve Fowler from Auto Express in the UK. Could you tell us and give us some details on what the effect on emissions, economy and performance will be of the software and hardware updates? Will your customers be better or worse off? And we've seen a very generous compensation package being offered to US customers. What sort of compensation package will be offered to customers in other territories?
Zum ersten Teil Ihrer Frage.
Well, the first part of your question,
Also so, dass wir natürlich Lösungen
you know,
anbieten,
the thing
technische
is,
Lösungen
we're
anbieten,
offering
die
solutions,
auf die
technical
Leistungsfähigkeit, die
solutions
Performance unserer Fahrzeuge keinen,
that
allenfalls
do not
marginalen,
impact the
spürbaren
performance of our
Einfluss haben.
cars. If they do, that impact will be marginal and not marginal and negligible. We won't be able to feel it. Secondly, you mentioned some of the packages that we offer to our customers around the world. Now, it's important to emphasize that our customers are always at the focus of our attention, and we take care of all our customers. So we're working on an overall package for all affected markets and customers to make sure that this process is as pleasant as possible for the customers concerned. Also, it's important to emphasize that we are not going to charge our customers for what we need to do. We always said that, and that statement continues to be true. Okay, let's stay in the first row. Felix Frieler,
Ich habe
DBA
eine ganze Menge
FX.
Fragen. Ich beschränke mich
I
jetzt mal
have
auf
a
3.
range of
Die erste
questions.
Frage
I'd like
an
to ask
Herrn
3 of
Pötsch.
them. Number
Sie
one, question to
kennen
Mr.
den
Pötsch.
Vorstand über lange Jahre. Sie
You've
kennen
known
jetzt den
the
Aufsichtsrat.
management board for
Wenn Sie
many
jetzt
years. You
zurückschauen,
now know the
welche
supervisory board.
Fehler haben aus
Looking
Ihrer
back,
Sicht Vorstand und Aufsichtsrat
as far as
in der
you're concerned,
Vergangenheit gemacht,
what mistakes
die
were
zu
made
diesem,
by the supervisory board and
Debakel
the
geführt
management
haben?
board? Mistakes that
Die zweite Frage an
caused
Herrn
this
Müller.
debacle. Second question
Wie
for
haben sich
Mr.
die
Müller.
Bestellungen entwickelt, also nicht die Auslieferung, sondern die Bestellungen der einzelnen
How have
Konzernmarken?
orders,
Können Sie
not
da
deliveries, how
konkrete
have
Zahlen
orders
nennen?
developed
Und die
across the
dritte
various brands?
Frage,
Can you give us any figures?
an denjenigen,
And
der sie
question
beantworten
number
möchte.
3, I don't know who would like to take that
Wann
one.
ist bei den Kosten für den gesamten
A question
Abgasskandal
regarding
eine
the costs
kritische
for
Masse
this
erreicht?
emissions
Also wann
scandal. When will
sind
you
die Kosten
reach
so hoch,
critical
dass man
mass? In other words,
auch
when will
Konsequenzen ins
costs
Auge
be
fassen
so
muss, wie zum
high
Beispiel
that you
den
have
Verkauf von
to take
Unternehmensteilen?
consequences,
Wie
for
sehen Ihre
instance,
Schätzungen da
by
aus? Lassen Sie
selling
uns ein
off
bisschen
certain parts of the
daran
company?
teilhaben.
Any estimates?
Startet Herr Pötsch.
Mr. Pötsch, would you like to go first?
Also zunächst mal zu der Frage, welche Fehler sind
First of
gemacht
all,
worden. Ich
the
denke,
question as to what mistakes were made.
Rausgearbeitet, dass jedenfalls nach dem
I think
heutigen
it has
Kenntnisstand
become apparent,
wir
at least
davon
from what we
ausgehen
know
können,
today,
dass es sich bei den Vorfällen
that we can
darum
assume
handelt, dass eine sehr überschaubare Gruppe
that a relatively small group of people
Fehler begangen hat,
actually
unverantwortlich
made
gehandelt
mistakes,
hat.
acted irresponsibly,
Keine Erkenntnisse über die Involvierung
there are
von
no
Aufsichtsrat oder
indications
Vorstand,
that
vorliegen.
the supervisory board or the
Natürlich
management board
müssen wir uns die
was
Frage,
involved.
Stellen, was können
And
wir
of course,
tun,
there's
um
one
solche,
question we have to ask, and that question is,
Vorfälle,
what can we do
auszuschalten.
to make sure
Insofern
that this
wird
never
sicherlich,
happens again?
notwendig sein, den Fortgang der Untersuchungen abzuwarten, wie
But
ich
first of all,
ausgeführt habe.
we have to wait and
sind
see what the
insbesondere,
results of the investigation are going
Vorgehensweise
to
der
be.
Revision darauf, dass man in besonderer Weise die Prozesse darauf
As I said, our internal audit department is focusing very closely on possible improvement in our processes. There's a question without a microphone, apparently.
Ich denke,
The answer by Mr. Pötsch.
darauf bezogen abwarten, bis wirklich belastbare
Well, I think we should wait and see.
Untersuchungsergebnisse vorliegen.
First of all, we need tangible investigation results. Your second question had to do with the number of incoming orders, and I'm talking about the first 11 months of this year. As far as I'm concerned, the figures are quite gratifying. If you look at the group as a whole, incoming orders are 3.5% up year on year. And as far as our budget is concerned, even up 4.2% on our budget. So we can be quite satisfied with the current situation. As for the third part of your question, the possible sale of assets, well, as I said before, and I'd like to emphasize that there are no plans to sell any assets. We're a company with 12 very strong brands. We are happy to have those brands, and there are no plans to sell any one of them. In fact, there is no need to even think about this question. I know that some journalists disagree, but I cannot confirm their views. And I'm not going to speculate today and give you a figure about the possible damages we might have to pay. That remains to be seen. We just have to wait and see, and then take it one step at a time, react appropriately. But we are firmly convinced that our liquidity and our performance is strong enough, so strong that we don't have to even think about this question. Thank you. Moving on, in the first row.
Dominic Tobin from the Sunday Times. Could I ask how you came to understand how the defeat device software works? Did this come from individuals who coded the software, or have you had engineers combing millions of lines of software to discover exactly how this works? Secondly, could I also ask how Volkswagen will be going about reducing that discrepancy you mentioned between the emissions and the fuel economy in the real world and the test results?
Ja, Sie sprechen ein kompliziertes Thema an.
Well,
Letztendlich,
what you're asking about is a complicated issue. We, our experts looked at the software. They analyzed all of the relevant functions that have been part of the software for more than 10 years. And this has been a very time-consuming process. We have made a lot of progress, but the process has not yet been completed. As you said, we're talking about millions of lines of code, and that code needs to be reviewed. As for those differences, well, first of all, we have to accept that they exist. And I think I said in my presentation that we're looking at different engine variants, 1.2, 1.6, 2-liter versions across various generations over a period of 10 years, different versions in Europe and in the United States. And what this means is that we need different solutions for different engines and variants. Now, some variants can be fixed with a software update. In other cases, we might need a software package plus some additional hardware. I gave you an example, the 6-cylinder TDI. We're going to replace the catalytic converter. So in some cases, the measures we have to take are manageable, but the hardware is more difficult. But as I said, all of these measures are currently being discussed with the US authorities. And as far as Europe is concerned, we know exactly what measures to take. And we're going to retrofit the affected vehicles in due course.
There's someone also in the second row, please. Jürgen Gehmann, Norddeutscher
Jürgen
Rundfunk.
Gehmann from NDR
Eine Frage
Television
zu Herrn
Network.
Sanz. Sie haben gesagt, Sie haben mit
Question
der
on
Aufklärung
Mr.
der
Sanz. You
Dieselthematik
said that
befasst. Da
to
würde mich
investigate the
interessieren,
diesel
warum, Herr
issues,
Sanz, und
you have appointed Mr.
war
Sanz. Why is
diese
it? Why is it him?
Personalie eventuell
Was
ein
that
Wunsch der
something that the majority
Mehrheitsaktionärsfamilien?
stakeholders had
Die
wanted?
zweite Frage
Right?
zu den
And the
Arbeitsplätzen.
second
Was
question
können Sie uns
on
da
jobs.
sagen
Can you say
in
anything
Bezug auf die Perspektive für
in
2016?
terms of the
Einerseits
2016
Leiharbeitnehmer, andererseits
decisions to
aber
be
auch
taken on
Stammbeleg.
temp staff and core workforce? Is there anything you would like to share with us? As far as your first question is concerned, and let me give you the background of that story here.
Den 20. September herum
Around the 20th of September, we were taken aback by the amount or the order of magnitude of the problems, and we had to establish a task force promptly which will and had to deal with the management of this crisis, and that was done with Mr. Gunninger, our chief counsel or legal counsel. And let me also say that this team has been working day in, day out, day and night in fact, and they've done an excellent job. But now we've come to a point where, let me be a bit colloquial by saying we see light at the end of the tunnel, right? And now we will invest more effort in managing this issue on a professional level. And a professional level presupposes that one of my colleagues on the board will be dealing with a top priority attitude, if you will. And as you've heard in my speech, we have been working a lot on realigning or reorienting this company, the group, and the structures, etc. So on the board level, we talked about the personalities of who could be in a position to head that process, who has the perseverance and the experience to carry this project forward, a very complicated and complex project. And this is how we agreed to appoint Mr. Garcia for the job. And this goes hand in hand with another professional appointment, which we have not mentioned, but has been, you probably have heard yesterday. Mr. Garcia transfers his responsibility to Mr. Brandstetter, the responsibilities for procurement, who will replace him on the procurement board member position. You also asked a question about our workforce in 2016. Let me reiterate what I said before. Job security, stable jobs is key, and this is true also as we speak. Temporary jobs are a tool of ensuring flexibility. Now, that is not new. And if ever changes occur, changes to our production programs, then this can or may have an impact on the number of temporary workers. Let me repeat what I said before. On the group board level, every Tuesday we looked into this problem of crisis management and how we move this whole process forward. So it's an ongoing dialogue, and it has been a unanimous decision by the group board to appoint this person. Let's go to the third row. Mr. Doll, Mr. Fromm, Mr. Murphy.
Doll, Die Welt. Eine Frage an Herrn
Die Welt. Question for Mr. Pötsch.
Herr Pötsch, Sie hatten von einer Kultur des Akzeptierens von Fehlverhalten gesprochen.
About the
Sie haben
culture of
außerdem gesagt, dass es
accepting
zum Beispiel in
faults or
wichtigen Bereichen
mistakes,
wie der
and in many
Motorenentwicklung kein
areas
Vier-Augen-Prinzip gab.
like engine development, there was no two-man rule, and the idea to establish control over such processes has been obsolete. Now, for a company that has been a benchmark of the industry in many areas, that was astounding, wasn't it? So couldn't you also look at entirely different areas within Volkswagen, where also there have been violations, possibly infringements of applicable laws? So we're not just talking about emissions, but other things, because the industry is heavily regulated. There may have been infringements elsewhere.
Also, zunächst mal die
Zitate first of all, you have quoted me correctly, and when it comes to engine development, yes, we have identified deficits as part of of our investigation, and also after what our internal auditors have ascertained, there's no question whatsoever that this has been a situation for us to look very closely now and investigate on a, well, if you will, broad base. What does that mean? It means that we collect a large amount of data now. Data volumes are extremely comprehensive, and which will obviously delay our processes a little further, or our investigation work. In other words, it requires a lot of time. But we do not want to select and pick out a few problems, but really we would like to be as broad-based as we can.
Das nochmal in eine realistische Betrachtung
Now, to put that into perspective, because the capacities to conduct those investigations is not endless, and therefore we have to establish a time frame or time schedule which identifies step by step the areas that are relevant and that we are going to scrutinize even further. That will reach into 2016 and 2017, of course. Now you can imagine, just to give you a number, that when it comes to auditing activities, more than 1,000 audits have already been planned for 2016. Thank you. Let's move the mic back, please, to Mr. Fromm. Mr. Fromm from Süddeutsche Zeitung. Mr. Müller, these days you've just visited one of their large shareholders in Qatar, and there was some background talk about the shareholder not being entirely happy about the way Volkswagen has been structured, talk about employee participation, I think, or labor union co-determination. Is that right? Do they have a problem with corporate culture? And what was it that you discussed with your shareholders in Qatar? Question number 2 for Mr. Perch. You'll have a new board member, the first lady to sit on your board, and the name has been given to us before. What's your expectations that you have from Ms. Homan-Den Hardt? What is she supposed to do? What do you expect in this coming year? Especially as it relates to what we can expect in the United States next year. So it seems, I think, that the biggest issues are still looming there in the background. And finally, sales or non-sales, Mr. Müller. You just said earlier that you have 12 brands, you're happy, and you do not expect that you have to divest anything. But we had the impression over the last couple of weeks that there are still parts within that 12 brand group that are more sacrosanct than others, or do you think all the kids are as endearing to you as all of them? Well, Mr. Fromm, we've been known each other for quite a while, so I can be a bit cheeky here. I, every morning, read what you write and what Mr. Doll writes and your colleagues, just to get a gist, an understanding of what is happening apparently within the Volkswagen Group. And it was with great interest also that I read that we have been quoted to appear in Qatar, where we have been given a piece of their mind, or being scolded at. You know, sometimes it's a far fetch. It's true, yes, I was in Qatar in order to present myself in my new function, in my new capacity, to the gentlemen there. And of course, it's quite normal that we discussed the current situation with them, because they're very much interested in that. They want to know how we deal with this type of crisis and what are we planning to do going forward. Now, all I can tell you at this point is that the talks that we've had with our Qatari shareholders were based on a consensus and our broad-based confidence that we share efforts and that we share the view that our cooperation in the future will be intensified rather than be questioned in any way. Now, coming back to your third question, and this is also something I just only read in the newspapers, that there are some parts of the company that are more sacrosanct than others. Now, I'm amazed to hear that. Where did you pick that information from? doesn't certainly come from me, but it's nice for you to ask, so it gives me a chance to answer. And let me echo what I said earlier. It's not a second we possibly think about getting rid of any of those parts of this great company, which have made that group so strong, which until the 20th or the 18th of September, it was an outstanding group, also in your eyes, mind you. This has not changed, and this company is so great precisely because we have those 12 brands in our portfolio, and all of them individually are successful. So it is a successful group of a number of component parts that temporarily is in problems or is facing problems, but we are convinced that with the reforms that it takes and the personnel changes that we've made, we've already set the course for a better future. As Ms. Hohmann-Dennert is concerned, well, we're really glad it has been possible to get a professional for legal matters and integrity. On the 1st of January 2016, she'll resume her office. And basically, we're actually throwing a bridge to what we said earlier. Because when we say that we are investigating, we're clarifying things, we're looking into what has happened and why it has happened, how did people behave, etc. Now, all of that can be addressed from a different point of view or from a different angle. I.e., I think this is one of the main areas of expertise for Ms. Hohmann-Dennert. Bring integrity into this company and establish a broad-based understanding. And she certainly doesn't start from scratch in the organization, but from what we have learned now, it's a good starting point for her job. Secondly, it's no question whatsoever that we will be facing litigation in the United States. Ms. Hohmann-Dennert has worked for another company in the past and has made an important contribution to organize these processes, let me put it like that. And I'm confident she will do that also in her function within our company to, in other words, establish a dialogue and a collaborative interaction with the authorities in a fruitful and appropriate way. Okay, let's continue with Ms. Wissenbach. Ms. Wissenbach, please.
Wissenbach von Reuters.
Wissenbach, Reuters.
Ich hätte noch mal Fragen zu den Rückstellungen.
Can I follow up on the contingencies, Mr. Percher, for the legal action, ensuing legal action? Is there anything?
Konkrete Rückstellungen vornehmen
Is there any material reserves that you're going to make for these impending trials, possibly legal action, like an SE? Because it's not about the assumption of innocence at this point. And if so, if you make additional contingencies, when would that happen? And then another question for Mr. Miller. So far, you have not traveled to the United States to face the public there. Are you planning to do that, to be at the motor show in Detroit, to stand on your knees in front of the public?
Ja, vielleicht nehme ich den Punkt, weil Sie mich angesprochen haben.
Let me take that first one, because you asked me directly.
Bis dato für juristische Auseinandersetzungen
So far, we have not created any reserves or contingencies for any litigation on our balance sheet. Now, for you to imagine how this technically works, I think we've established a stringent process where all areas affected will be constantly monitoring whether there is a potential threat of litigation, because you cannot just create any random contingencies on your balance sheet. You can't. You just first have to check in your different departments, is there a relative risk of any such threat cropping up, and therefore, because there was no such risk in the past, no contingencies have been made. However, these cannot be ruled out going forward. The fact of the matter is that in the United States, the situation we're facing is that representatives of our group have admitted that we have engaged in wrongdoing and that illegal devices are installed in our vehicles, unlawful devices. And that already paves the way, if you will, for legal action. And we are monitoring that on an ongoing basis, and we could expect that at some point in time that will lead to a balance sheet item to reflect that legal risk. At the moment, it's premature to say that, whether that will be on our annual accounts or not. And you asked me the question of how about planning a visit to the United States. You're right. So far, in my capacity as chairman of the board, I have not yet been to the United States. And at the moment, there has been no occasion, really, because as I said earlier, first of all, we are negotiating on the technical solutions with the EPA and CARB. And for those meetings, we have appointed the best possible delegations of people of Volkswagen and Audi on the ground. And next week also more talks will be held. Now, once the conditions are there to engage in further talks beyond that, and we believe that this will be during the days after the Detroit Motor Show, then I will be scheduling a visit to America. Now, whether I'll be kneeling down or not, well, not for me to say at this point. I think I'll be self-confident in my in the way that I meet people there, and I, of course, will apologize for things that have occurred, but I'll be optimistic and quite confident looking into the future. Because, let me echo what I said before, mistakes have happened, we will make sure that they'll be investigated, we'll make sure it will never happen again. And Volkswagen also will be realigned to be prepared for that new and successful future, including in the United States.